Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Frank Kessler tightened the last bolt on the model rocket he was building with his daughter. These Saturday afternoon projects had become sacred, between them a tradition that began when Cassidy was barely tall enough to see over the workbench. "Hand me the stabilizer fins, Cass," Frank said, his weathered fingers nimble despite years of engineering work. Cassidy, now 18 and mere weeks from graduation, placed the small plastic pieces in his palm. "Dad, you think this one will go higher than the last?" Frank allowed a rare smile. "With the adjustments we made, it'll break our record." These moments, these small victories shared between father and daughter, were what Frank lived for. Not the title of senior mechanical engineer at Davidson Technologies, not the house in the suburbs of Charlotte. Just this, the quiet understanding between them, a bond forged through patient teaching and unwavering presence. The garage door opened behind them. Sophia, Frank's wife of 20 years, stepped in, designer sunglasses pushed atop her carefully highlighted hair. "Still playing with toys?" Sophia said, shopping bags dangling from each arm. "It's almost dinner time." Frank checked his watch. "It's 4:30, Sophia. I've got plans with Mara at 6, she said, not bothering to look at either of them. "There's leftover pasta in the fridge." Frank watched his wife disappear into the house. 20 years. 2 decades since they'd met at university, she's studying business administration, he engineering. Back then, her ambition had matched his own quiet determination. They'd talked about building something together, a life, a family, a legacy. Now it seemed Sophia was building something else entirely. Without him. "Dad," Cassidy's voice pulled him back. "You okay?" "Just thinking about thrust calculations." Frank lied smoothly, refocusing on the rocket. "Let's get this finished before your mom leaves." Later that night, after a quiet dinner with Cassidy, Frank sat in his home office reviewing quarterly projections for work. His phone buzzed. A text from Jonas. "Beer at Barrel and Brew tomorrow? Got a new IPA you need to try." Frank typed back, "Sure." 1 p.m. Jonas had been his friend since before Sophia, before the house, before everything. They'd met during freshman orientation at college and had remained steadfast through marriages, career changes, and Jonas's divorce 5 years ago. The next day, Frank sat across from Jonas at Barrel and Brew, the small craft brewery his friend had opened after leaving corporate life. "How's the rocket coming along?" Jonas asked, sliding a pint across the worn wooden table. "She's designing the paint job now," Frank said, taking a sip. "This is good. Hint of citrus, orange peel, and coriander," Jonas confirmed, then leaned forward. "And how's Sophia?" Frank's face revealed nothing, but his pause was enough for Jonas, who had known him too long to be fooled. "That bad, huh?" "She's out most nights now," Frank said simply. "Says it's with Mara." Jonas snorted. "Mara Duval is still in the picture?" "That woman has the moral compass of a weather vane. They've been friends since college." "She's a bad influence, Frank. Always has been." Jonas took a long drink. "You know what she told my ex-wife during our divorce? That she should take me for everything because that's what men deserve." Frank rubbed his thumb along the condensation on his glass. "Sophie is an adult. She makes her own choices. And what about you? What choices are you making?" Frank looked out the window at the Charlotte skyline. "I'm focused on Cassidy right now. Her graduation is coming up. And after that," Jonas pressed. "After that," Frank said carefully, "we'll see where things stand." Jonas studied his friend's face. "You know something, don't you?" Frank took another sip of his beer. "I know enough." On Wednesday afternoon, Frank left work early, a rarity for him. He parked his gray Ford pickup in the lot of the Fitness Edge gym, positioned with a clear view of the entrance but partially hidden by a delivery van, a T4:17 p.m. Sophia's white BMW pulled into the lot. She stepped out wearing workout clothes that seemed designed more for appearance than functionality. 7 minutes later, a black Audi TT Roadster pulled in. A young man, mid-20s, Frank guessed, emerged wearing athletic shorts and a tight-fitting shirt that showcased carefully cultivated muscles. Frank didn't need to follow. He knew the routine by now. Personal training session. Except Sophia had canceled her family gym membership 3 months ago. claiming she needed a change of environment. His phone vibrated. A text from Cassidy. "Where are you?" "Thought we were going to look at those college brochures tonight." Frank texted back. "Got held up. Be home in 30. "Sorry, kiddo." He started the truck's engine, but didn't immediately drive away. Instead, he opened an app on his phone and made a recording. April 15th. Sophia arrived at Fitness Edge at 4:17 p.m. Male subject arrived at 4:24 p.m. Same black Audi, same routine. Frank had always been methodical. It was what made him an excellent engineer, his ability to observe, document, and analyze before acting. Some might call it calculating. Frank preferred to think of it as strategic, and strategy required patience. Frank arrived home to find Cassidy at the kitchen table, college brochures spread out before her. "Sorry I'm late," he said, setting his laptop bag down. Work got complicated. Cassidy looked up with a smile that reminded Frank of her childhood, pure and trusting. "It's okay. I've been narrowing it down. Mechanical engineering at NC State or UNC Charlotte." "Following the old man's footsteps?" Frank asked, warmth spreading through his chest. "Well, someone needs to design rockets that actually make it to space," she teased. Frank laughed, a rare sound in the Kessler household these days. "Where's your mom?" "Jim, I think. Said she'd be back for dinner, but that was 2 hours ago." Frank nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Let's order pizza. My treat." The front door opened around 7, and Sophia entered the kitchen. Her hair was perfectly styled despite her supposed workout, and her gym bag looked suspiciously light. "Pizza again?" she said, eyeing the open box on the counter. "Really, Frank, Cassidy and I were busy with college planning." Frank replied evenly. Sophia's expression softened when she looked at their daughter. "Any decisions yet, sweetie?" Leaning toward NC State, Cassidy said. "Their engineering program is top tier." "Engineering?" Sophia frowned. "I thought we discussed communications or business." "You discussed," Cassidy corrected quietly. "I've always wanted engineering, Mom." "Like Dad." A flash of something irritation, perhaps, or resentment crossed Sophia's face. "Well, there's time to consider options." She turned to Frank. "Mara and I are going to that new wine bar downtown on Friday. Don't wait up." "Actually," Frank said, "I was thinking we should all have dinner together Friday. Family night. It's been a while." Sophia hesitated, caught off guard by the suggestion. "I've already made plans." "Cancel them," Frank said, his tone reasonable but firm. "Cassidy's graduation is next month. We should spend more time together before she heads off to college." Cassidy looked between her parents, hope brightening her eyes. "That would be nice, Mom." Put on the spot, Sophia relented. "Fine. Family dinner on Friday." Later that night, after Cassidy had gone to bed, Frank sat in his darkened office, the blue glow of his computer screen illuminating his focused expression. On the monitor were bank statements, property deeds, investment accounts, the financial architecture of 20 years of marriage. With careful precision, he began making adjustments. Not large movements that would trigger attention, but small, calculated changes. Building a financial firewall brick by brick, the law firm of Donaldson and Pierce had already drafted the separation agreement. All it needed was his signature and, eventually, Sophia's. But timing was everything. Frank glanced at the calendar on his desk, where Cassidy's graduation date was circled in red. 6 weeks. 6 weeks to secure everything that mattered. The family dinner on Friday was a study in tension barely contained by social norms. Sophia arrived home late, claiming traffic delays, though Frank had watched her location on the family-sharing app move from the gym to their home with an unexplained 20-minute stop in between. "I made your favorite," Frank said as Sophia entered the dining room. "Herb-crusted salmon." "Oh," Sophia said, looking genuinely surprised. "Thank you." Throughout dinner, Frank watched his wife carefully. She was distracted, checking her phone beneath the table when she thought no one was looking. Her laugh came too quickly at Cassidy's jokes, her questions about college plans too performative. "How's work?" Frank asked, cutting into his salmon. "Oh, fine. The usual real estate drama. Buyers backing out, sellers being unreasonable." Frank nodded. Sophia hadn't closed a deal in 3 months. He knew because he checked the county property records regularly. Her realtor license was still active, but she barely used it anymore. Yet somehow, her personal credit card charges had increased significantly. "In the gym?" he asked casually. "That new trainer working out?" Sophia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What trainer? Didn't you mention starting with a personal trainer? For that marathon you were thinking about?" "Oh, right." Sophia recovered quickly. "Yes, he's good. Pushing me harder than I expected." Cassidy brightened. "A marathon? That's awesome, Mom. When is it?" "It's not scheduled yet," Sophia said. "Just training for now." After dinner, Cassidy volunteered to clean up, leaving Frank and Sophia alone in the living room. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. "That was a nice dinner," Sophia finally said. "Thank you. We should do it more often," Frank replied. "Yes." Sophia trailed off, then straightened. "Frank, I've been thinking. Maybe we should take a vacation this summer. After Cassidy's graduation. Just the two of us." Frank studied his wife's face. Was this guilt? An attempt at reconciliation? Or something else? "Where were you thinking?" he asked. "The Bahamas, maybe, or somewhere in Europe. Somewhere romantic." Frank nodded slowly. "I'll look into it." That night, as Sophia slept beside him, Frank lay awake. She had showered before bed, washing away any trace of the day. But in the bathroom trash, partially hidden beneath tissues, he noticed a receipt from a lingerie store for items he'd never seen. The following Wednesday, Frank parked outside the upscale apartment complex where Mara Duval lived. He knew Sophia would be there. Wine Wednesday had been her ritual with Mara for years. But lately, these gatherings had extended late into the night, with Sophia returning home smelling of more than just wine. At 9:17 p.m., a black Audi TT pulled into the lot. The young man from the gym emerged, checking his phone before entering the building. Frank activated the recording app on his phone, documenting time, location, and description. Through the large lobby windows, Frank watched the young man greet the concierge with familiar ease. The concierge nodded toward the elevators without requiring sign-in. A regular visitor, then, Frank waited 15 minutes before approaching the building himself. He wore a delivery cap, pulled low, and carried a bag from a popular local restaurant. "Delivery for 7:14, he told the concierge. "Ms. Duval, she usually comes down for deliveries." Frank shrugged. "Instructions say to bring it up. Some kind of surprise birthday thing." The concierge hesitated, then waved him through. "Elevator on the right." Frank rode to the 7th floor. But instead of approaching apartment 714, he positioned himself at the end of the hallway with a clear view of the door. He set up his phone on a small tripod hidden behind a decorative plant, angled toward Mara's apartment. 40 minutes later, the door opened. The young trainer emerged with Sophia close behind. They kissed, not a friendly peck, but deeply, passionately. The trainer whispered something that made Sophia laugh, her hand lingering on his chest. "Call me tomorrow," she said, loud enough for Frank to hear. "I'll make up some excuse to get away." "Why all the secrecy still?" the trainer asked. "Just leave him already." Sophia glanced down the empty hallway. "Soon," she said. "After Cassidy's graduation. Everything will change then, Andrew. I promise." As the door closed, Frank retrieved his phone and slipped back to the elevators, the restaurant bag still in hand. He had what he needed. Back in his truck, Frank reviewed the video. Clear, undeniable evidence of his wife's infidelity with this man, Andrew. But it was her words that cut deepest. After Cassidy's graduation. Everything will change then. Frank started the engine, his mind already 3 steps ahead. If Sophia wanted to wait until after graduation to blow up their family, he would be prepared. That on his drive home, Frank called his attorney. "It's Frank Kessler. I need to accelerate the timeline on those documents we discussed, and I have some new evidence to add to the file." 2 weeks later, the official graduation announcement arrived from West Charlotte High School. Cassidy brought it to breakfast, her excitement palpable. "Look what came today," she said, sliding the embossed invitation across the table. "May 24th, 10 a.m. I get 3 tickets for the ceremony, but the reception afterward is open to everyone." Frank picked up the announcement, a surge of pride washing over him. "My little girl, graduating with honors." "Dad," Cassidy groaned. Though her smile betrayed her pleasure at his praise, "Sophia, sipping her coffee at the counter, joined the conversation. We should plan a party afterward. Something special. Frank looked up, surprised by Sophia's sudden interest in family celebrations. I was thinking the same thing. Maybe here at the house. Perfect, Sophia said, an odd gleam in her eye. I'll handle the invitations. Friends, family, your co-workers. And Mara? Frank asked innocently. Of course, Sophia replied. She's practically family. Later that afternoon, Frank picked up Cassidy from her part-time job at the local science center. Mom seemed excited about the graduation party. Cassidy said after a moment. That's nice, right? Frank kept his eyes on the road. Yes, it is. She's been different lately, Cassidy continued, her voice careful. Happier, maybe, but also, I don't know, distant. Frank glanced at his daughter, weighing his words. Your mother's going through some things, Cass. People sometimes get lost in their own needs. Are you guys okay? The directness of her question caught Frank off guard. We're. Frank started, then paused. He wouldn't lie to Cassidy, but he wouldn't burden her either. We're both focused on you right now. Your graduation, your future. That's what matters. Cassidy studied her father's profile. You know you can talk to me, right? I'm not a little kid anymore. Frank reached over and squeezed her hand. I know, kiddo, and I promise, when the time is right, we'll talk. But for now, let's focus on your big day. That evening, Frank worked late in his home office, reviewing the separation agreement his attorney had prepared. The document outlined a clear division of assets with Frank retaining the house, his retirement accounts, and the majority of their joint savings. It was aggressive but legally sound, especially with the evidence of Sophia's infidelity. The key, his attorney had explained, was filing for legal separation before any confrontation. Once filed, new debts or assets acquired by either party would be considered individual, not marital property. Frank had already quietly transferred the house deed solely to his name, a move made possible by a document Sophia had signed months ago. She'd been 3 glasses into a wine night with Mara when Frank had presented her with what he described as refinancing paperwork for their mortgage. In her inebriated state, she'd signed without reading the details, including the quitclaim deed, transferring her ownership interest to Frank. Was it manipulative? Perhaps. But Frank saw it as self-preservation, protection for himself, and, more importantly, for Cassidy. A soft knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. Dad, Cassidy called. Can I come in? Of course, Frank said, minimizing the document on his screen. Cassidy entered, holding a stack of mail. This came for you today. I forgot to give it to you earlier. Frank took the envelopes, noticing the logo from his attorney's office on one of them. Thanks, honey. What are you working on so late? She asked, glancing at his computer. Just some more projects, Frank said. Nothing exciting. Cassidy lingered by the door. Mom's out again. With Mara, she said. Frank nodded, keeping his expression neutral. Your mom and Mara have been friends a long time. I know, but... Cassidy hesitated. Dad, is Mom seeing someone else? The directness of the question stunned Frank. He carefully set down the mail and looked at his daughter. What makes you ask that? Cassidy shifted uncomfortably. I saw a text on her phone. She left it on the counter while she was in the shower last week. There were messages from someone named Andrew. They didn't sound friendly. They sounded romantic. Frank felt a cold anger building inside him, not at Cassidy, but at Sophia's carelessness. Even in her betrayal, she couldn't protect their daughter from the fallout. Cassidy, Frank said gently, I want you to focus on school and graduation right now. Whatever is happening between your mother and me. So there is something, Cassidy interrupted, her voice tight. Frank sighed. Adult relationships are complicated, honey. Your mother and I, we've grown in different directions over the years. That's not an answer, Cassidy said, tears welling in her eyes. Frank stood and embraced his daughter. I promise you, after graduation, everything will be clearer. Can you trust me until then? Cassidy nodded against his shoulder. I just don't want our family to fall apart. No matter what, Frank said firmly, you and I will always be family. Nothing will change that. After Cassidy went to bed, Frank opened the envelope from his attorney. Inside was confirmation that the legal separation had been filed with the court. From this point forward, All assets and debts would be considered separate property. Sophia couldn't touch his accounts, couldn't claim his retirement funds, couldn't take the house. Frank picked up his phone and dialed Jonas. "It's done," he said when his friend answered. "Legal separation filed today." "Does Sophia know yet?" Jonas asked. "No, and she won't until graduation day." "Frank," Jonas's voice was concerned, "are you sure about this timeline? Why wait?" "Because that's what she's planning," Frank replied. "She wants to make her big exit at Cassidy's graduation party, in front of everyone. One final humiliation." "How do you know?" Frank closed his eyes, remembering. "I overheard her. Last week, she was on the phone with Mara in the backyard. She didn't know I came home early." The conversation replayed in his mind. Sophia, wine glass in hand, pacing by the pool. "It's perfect timing, Mara. After the ceremony, during the party. Everyone will be there. I'll finally be free of him. Yes, Andrew's on board. Frank will be blindsided. Make it unforgettable, that's the plan. So you're going to beat her to the punch," Jonas summarized. "No," Frank corrected. "I'm going to let her throw the punch. And then I'm going to show her she was swinging at shadows all along." May 24th dawned clear and warm, a perfect day for new beginnings. Frank woke early, a sense of calm resolve settling over him. Today was Cassidy's day, first and foremost. Whatever happened between him and Sophia would be secondary to celebrating their daughter's achievement. "You're up early," Sophia said, appearing in the doorway as he adjusted his tie. She wore a silk robe, her hair wrapped in a towel. "Big day," Frank replied simply. Sophia lingered, watching him. "Yes, it is." There was something in her tone, a hint of anticipation, perhaps even excitement that confirmed what Frank already knew. Today was indeed going to be a big day, for reasons beyond their daughter's graduation. "I picked up your dress from the dry cleaners," Frank said. "The blue one you said you wanted to wear. It's hanging in the closet." Surprise flickered across Sophia's face. "Thank you. That was thoughtful." Frank nodded, buttoning his suit jacket. "I'll go make coffee. Cassidy will be up soon." Downstairs, Frank prepared breakfast, Cassidy's favorite French toast with fresh berries. As he cooked, he mentally reviewed his plan. The envelope was ready in his inside jacket pocket. His attorney was on standby. Jonas would arrive early to help set up for the party and provide moral support. Everything was in place. Cassidy bounded down the stairs at 7:30, already dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, her graduation gown and cap draped over her arm. "Morning, Dad," she said brightly. "Something smells amazing." "French toast," Frank said, sliding a plate toward her. "Fuel for the big day." Cassidy sat at the counter, her eyes bright with excitement. "I can't believe it's finally here. High school done. College next." "Nervous about your speech?" Frank asked, pouring her a glass of orange juice. A S-class valedictorian, Cassidy would be addressing the entire graduating class and their families. "A little," she admitted, "but I practiced it so many times I could recite it in my sleep." Sophia joined them, now dressed in a sapphire blue dress that accentuated her figure. Her hair and makeup were immaculate, more elaborate than usual for a morning event. "Good morning," she said, accepting the coffee Frank offered. "Cassidy, honey, you look wonderful. Are you ready?" "As I'll ever be," Cassidy replied. "Dad made French toast." "I see that," Sophia said, eyeing the plate. "I'll just have coffee. We should leave by 8:30 to get good seats." The drive to West Charlotte High School was largely silent. As they pulled into the crowded parking lot, Frank noticed a familiar black Audi parked near the entrance. S.O. Andrew would be attending the ceremony. Frank had suspected as much, but seeing confirmation still sent a surge of cold anger through him. "There's Grandma and Grandpa," Cassidy said, pointing to Frank's parents waiting by the main entrance. "I see them," Frank said, parking the car. "You go on ahead to the student assembly area. We'll save seats with your grandparents." Cassidy hugged her father tightly. "Love you, Dad. Love you too, kiddo. So proud of you." She gave her mother a briefer hug before hurrying off, cap and gown in hand. Frank and Sophia approached his parents, the greeting a study in strained politeness. They found seats near the front, thanks to Cassidy's academic honors. As they settled in, Frank scanned the crowd, noting Jonas's arrival. His friend gave him a subtle nod before taking a seat several rows back. Then Frank spotted him, Andrew. The personal trainer was seated near the middle, wearing a flashy blue suit that matched Sophia's dress too perfectly to be coincidence. As if sensing Frank's gaze, Sophia turned to look in Andrew's direction, a brief smile passing between them. Frank said nothing, adjusting his cuffs as the ceremony began. The graduation proceeded with the expected pomp and circumstance. Then came the moment Frank had been waiting for. Cassidy's valedictory address. She approached the podium with confidence, her honors cords swaying gently as she adjusted the microphone. Fellow graduates, faculty, family, and friends, she began, her voice clear and strong. Today marks not an ending, but a transition, a moment when we step from one chapter of our lives into the next. Frank watched his daughter with undisguised pride. She spoke without notes, her words flowing naturally as she addressed her classmates and the assembled audience. The relationships that have sustained us with teachers, with friends, and especially with family have shaped who we are, Cassidy continued. I want to take a moment to thank my parents, who have shown me through their examples what it means to be dedicated, hardworking, and true to oneself. Frank felt Sophia shift beside him. From a corner of his eye, he saw her glance toward Andrew again. My father, Cassidy said, her voice softening, taught me that integrity isn't about grand gestures, but about the small choices we make when no one is watching. And my mother showed me the importance of pursuing one's own path. The words were diplomatic, carefully chosen, but Frank heard the subtle difference in how Cassidy described each parent. Had she already begun to separate them in her mind? As Cassidy concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, Frank felt a moment of doubt. Was he doing the right thing? Would his plan protect Cassidy, or merely substitute one form of pain for another? But then he remembered the text she'd seen on Sophia's phone. The betrayal was already affecting their daughter. Better a clean break than a prolonged deception. After the ceremony, graduates and families spilled onto the school lawn for photos and congratulations. Frank found Cassidy surrounded by friends, her smile radiant. There she is, he said, approaching with open arms. The smartest, most eloquent valedictorian in West Charlotte history. Cassidy laughed, embracing him. Dad, stop. It wasn't that great. It was perfect, Frank insisted. Your mom and I are so proud. As if summoned, Sophia appeared at their side, her smile tight but convincing. Wonderful speech, honey. Really beautiful. Frank noticed Andrew hovering nearby, pretending to check his phone while clearly waiting for Sophia. We should get some family photos, Frank suggested, gesturing to his parents who were approaching with their camera. Of course, Sophia agreed, though her eyes flickered briefly toward Andrew. The caterers should be at the house by now, Frank said, checking his watch. We should head back to set up for the party. Sophia nodded. I'll meet you there. I need to pick up the cake. I thought the cake was being delivered, Cassidy said, frowning. There was a mix-up, Sophia said quickly. Won't take long. I'll be right behind you. Frank watched as Sophia made her way to Andrew, their brief conversation obscured by the crowd. Then they separated, heading to their respective cars. She's not really getting a cake, is she? Cassidy asked quietly. Frank put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. Let's focus on your celebration, okay? Everything else can wait. By the time they arrived home, the party preparations were well underway. The caterers had set up tables in the backyard. A banner reading, "Congratulations, graduate," hung across the patio. Jonas was already there, helping direct the setup. There's the genius. Congratulations, kid. Thanks, Uncle Jonas, Cassidy said, using the honorary title she'd given him years ago. Your speech knocked it out of the park, Jonas continued. Your dad recorded it on his phone. Already watched it twice. As Cassidy went upstairs to change for the party, Jonas pulled Frank aside. She's not here yet. Frank shook his head. Meeting the trainer first. They'll probably arrive together. You sure you want to do this today? With everyone here. That's her plan, Frank said. And I'm just following her lead. Guests began to arrive around noon. Family friends, Cassidy's classmates, Frank's colleagues, neighbors. The backyard filled with conversation and laughter. Sophia arrived 45 minutes late, with Andrew trailing behind her. They didn't enter together, but their coordinated timing was obvious to anyone paying attention. "Sorry I'm late," Sophia announced, air-kissing Frank's mother on both cheeks. Cake disaster. All sorted now. Frank noticed there was no cake in her hands, nor did Andrew appear to be carrying one. The catering company had already provided a beautiful graduation cake that sat on display near the gift table. Andrew made himself comfortable at the bar, ordering a whiskey and surveying the party like a predator assessing potential territory. His gaze lingered on the house, the pool, the well-appointed patio. Frank approached him, extending his hand. "I don't believe we've met." "Frank Kessler." Andrew hesitated, then shook his hand with a grip that was deliberately firm. "Andrew Monroe, friend of the family." "Interesting," Frank said mildly. "I know most of our family friends. How do you know us?" "I know Sophia from the gym," Andrew said, eyes darting to where Sophia stood with Cassidy. "I'm a personal trainer there." "I see," Frank nodded. "And she invited you to our daughter's graduation party?" Andrew took a sip of his whiskey, a smirk playing at his lips. "She thought it would be good for me to be here today." The implication was clear. Andrew knew what was coming. He was here to witness Frank's humiliation and acclaim his prize Sophia afterward. "Well," Frank said, "I'm glad you could make it. Today is full of surprises." Andrew's smirk widened. "I bet it is." The party continued, with Cassidy at the center of attention. She opened graduation gifts, laughed with friends, and circulated among the guests with natural ease. Frank kept one eye on his daughter and the other on Sophia, who seemed to grow increasingly agitated as the afternoon wore on. Around 3 o'clock, as the party reached its peak attendance, Frank saw Sophia nod slightly to Mara. It was time. Sophia picked up a serving spoon and tapped it against her wine glass, the clear ringing sound cutting through the party chatter. "Everyone," she called out, her voice carrying across the backyard. "If I could have your attention for a moment." Conversations quieted as guests turned toward Sophia. She stood on the raised portion of the patio, wine glass in hand, Andrew now strategically positioned nearby. "First," she said, smiling broadly, "I want to congratulate our amazing daughter, Cassidy, on her graduation. We're so proud of you, honey." A brief round of applause followed, with Cassidy smiling uncertainly from her position near the cake table. She glanced at Frank, question in her eyes. "Today is about new beginnings," Sophia continued. "Fresh starts. And in that spirit, I have an announcement to make." Frank moved closer to Cassidy, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. "After much thought and soul-searching," Sophia said, her voice taking on a practiced emotional quality, "I've decided to make a significant change in my life." She paused, surveying the suddenly uncomfortable audience before continuing. "I've decided to start a new life," she announced, moving to stand beside Andrew. Without Frank, a collective gasp rippled through the guests. Cassidy stiffened under Frank's hand. "This is Andrew," Sophia continued, taking the trainer's arm. "He's been the love I've needed for a long time." The silence that followed was absolute. All eyes turned to Frank, watching for his reaction to this public humiliation. Calmly, with the measured movements of a man who had anticipated this moment for weeks, Frank stepped forward. His face revealed nothing as he approached his wife and her lover. "Congratulations on your honesty," he said, his voice carrying in the silence. "It's refreshing after months of deception." Sophia blinked, clearly thrown by his composure. Frank reached into his jacket and removed the envelope he'd prepared. "I believe this belongs to you," he said, handing it to Sophia. Confusion crossed her face as she took the envelope. With a triumphant glance toward Mara, who was watching with barely contained excitement, Sophia tore it open. As she scanned the contents, her expression transformed from smugness to bewilderment, then to horror. "What is this?" she whispered, color draining from her face. "Exactly what it looks like," Frank replied evenly. "Legal separation papers, filed and approved by the court 6 weeks ago. Property transfers completed last month. And a few other items you might find interesting." Sophia flipped through the documents, her hands beginning to shake. This can't be legal. I never signed. Check the last page, Frank suggested. That's your signature on the property transfer. March 15th, if you're wondering about the date. You'd had quite a bit of wine that night. Andrew peered over Sophia's shoulder at the documents. What is all this? It means, Frank explained, addressing the trainer directly, that everything you see here, the house, the cars, the investments are mine, legally separated from marital assets. He turned back to Sophia. You'll also find a letter in there, from someone who has something to say to you. Sophia's fingers trembled as she extracted the final item from the envelope, a single sheet of paper in Cassidy's handwriting. As she read, tears filled her eyes. Cassidy, she breathed, looking up to find her daughter standing beside Frank, her expression a mixture of hurt and resolution. I saw your texts, Mom, Cassidy said quietly. Weeks ago. With him. She nodded toward Andrew, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. Dad didn't tell me anything. I figured it out myself. Sophia reached for her daughter. Honey, it's complicated. No, Cassidy cut her off. It's actually very simple. You cared more about yourself than our family. You made your choice. Live with it. The words, delivered without rancor but with quiet finality, seemed to strike Sophia physically. She staggered slightly, clutching the documents to her chest. This can't be happening, she murmured, then louder. This isn't fair. Her outburst broke the stunned silence that had fallen over the party. Guests began to murmur, some discreetly moving toward the exits. You, Sophia rounded on Frank, her composure shattering completely. You planned this. You manipulated everything. I simply prepared for what I knew was coming, Frank replied calmly. You made your plans. I made mine. Andrew, assessing the shifting dynamics, began to back away from Sophia. I think I should go. Go. Sophia turned on him. After everything I promised you, the life we were going to have. Andrew glanced around at the watching crowd, at Frank's steady gaze, at Cassidy's hurt expression. This is not what I signed up for, he said. Call me when things settle down. As he retreated, Sophia let out a sound half scream, half sob that echoed across the suddenly silent backyard. You can't do this to me, she shouted at Frank. After 20 years, after everything I've done for this family, what exactly have you done, Sophia? Frank asked, his voice still calm, but with an edge of steel beneath. Besides lie? Besides cheat? Besides plan to humiliate me in front of our friends and family on our daughter's graduation day? Mara stepped forward, putting an arm around Sophia's trembling shoulders. Come on, honey. Let's get out of here. You can stay with me tonight. But Sophia was beyond consolation. This is my house, she shrieked, waving the documents. These papers are fake. They have to be. They're quite real, Jonas interjected, stepping forward. I witnessed most of them, and my brother the attorney processed them. All perfectly legal. Sophia looked wildly around the yard, at the guests now actively leaving, at Cassidy's stony face, at Frank's implacable expression. Reality seemed to crash down on her all at once. This isn't over, she hissed at Frank. You'll regret this. Both of you. With that final threat, she allowed Mara to lead her into the house, leaving a wake of stunned silence behind them. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the debris of the abandoned party. Most guests had departed quickly after Sophia's meltdown, offering awkward congratulations to Cassidy and uncomfortable goodbyes to Frank. Only Jonas remained, helping the catering staff clean up while Frank and Cassidy sat quietly by the pool. You okay, kiddo? Frank asked his daughter, who had barely spoken since the confrontation. Cassidy stared at the water surface. I knew it was coming. I just didn't know it would be so. She trailed off, searching for the word. Public, Frank offered. Ugly, Cassidy corrected. Mom was so different, like someone I don't even know. Frank sighed, watching the play of light on the pool. Your mother hasn't been herself for some time. Maybe this person, the one you saw today, is who she's become. Did you know? About her plans for today. Frank hesitated, then nodded. I overheard her talking to Mara a few weeks ago. She wanted to make her announcement at your party. To start her new life in front of everyone. That's why you were ready, Cassidy said, understanding dawning. The papers, the legal stuff. You knew what she was planning to do. I wanted to protect us, Frank said simply. Both of us. Cassidy leaned against her father's shoulder. Thanks, Dad. Inside the house, the sound of raised voices echoed from upstairs Sophia, presumably gathering her things with Mara's support. Moments later, the front door slammed, and a car engine started in the driveway. Jonas approached, carrying 3 bottles of water. They're gone, he reported, handing bottles to Frank and Cassidy. Sophia took some clothes and her personal items. Said she'd be back for the rest later. Is she staying with you, Aunt Mara? Cassidy asked, a hint of bitterness in her voice. Looks that way, Jonas confirmed. At least for now. Frank uncapped his water bottle, his mind already shifting to the next phases of his plan. Cassidy, why don't you call some of your friends? Salvage what's left of your graduation day. Go to a movie or dinner. Cassidy looked uncertain. I don't want to leave you alone. I'll be fine, Frank assured her. Jonas is here. And honestly, I could use some quiet time to process everything. After some persuasion, Cassidy agreed, calling her best friend to arrange an impromptu dinner celebration with a few close classmates. Once she had left, Frank and Jonas moved to the home office. She really didn't see it coming, Jonas said, settling into an armchair. Sophia, I mean. She looked blindsided. People who are consumed by their own desires often miss what's right in front of them, Frank replied, opening his laptop. She was so focused on her exit strategy that she never considered I might have one too. What happens now? Jonas asked. Frank brought up a document on his screen, a detailed timeline he'd created weeks ago. Now he moved to phase 2. Sophia will try to fight the separation agreement. She'll claim deception, coercion, anything to invalidate the asset division. Will that work? No, Frank said confidently. My attorney has assured me the paperwork is solid. The property transfers were completed legally, even if the circumstances were strategic. And Cassidy, Frank's expression softened. She's stronger than I realized. She figured out what was happening weeks ago, wrote that letter to her mother on her own. I didn't ask her to. She's your daughter, Jonas said. Observant, analytical, and apparently just as strategic. Frank's prediction proved accurate. The following morning, Sophia arrived at the house unannounced, accompanied by a stern-looking man in a suit who introduced himself as Gerald Whitman, attorney at law. I need to collect the rest of my things, Sophia announced, pushing past Frank into the foyer. By all means, Frank replied evenly, noting that Andrew was conspicuously absent from this visit. As Sophia headed upstairs, her attorney remained in the entryway with Frank. Mr. Kessler, Whitman began, my client contends that the separation agreement and property transfers were executed under false pretenses. We intend to challenge these documents in court. Frank nodded calmly. She's welcome to try. My attorney is expecting your filing. Upstairs, the sounds of drawers being yanked open and closet doors slamming punctuated their conversation. This doesn't have to be adversarial, Whitman continued. A reasonable division of assets. The division is complete, Frank interrupted, as documented in the papers your client received yesterday. Before Whitman could respond, Sophia stormed down the stairs, arms full of clothing and jewelry. Where's my car? She demanded. The BMW? Frank asked innocently. It's registered in my name. Always has been. Sophia's face contorted with rage. You can't just take everything. I haven't taken anything, Frank replied. I've merely secured what was already mine. We'll see about that, Sophia spat, turning to her attorney. Gerald, let's go. I can't stand being in this house another minute. Over the next week, Frank received formal notification that Sophia was contesting the separation agreement. Her attorney claimed the document had been signed under duress and presented under false pretenses. They demanded immediate reinstatement of Sophia's access to all joint accounts and property. Frank's attorney, Patricia Donaldson, a sharp-minded woman with 20 years of family law experience, was unfazed. These claims are standard, she explained during their meeting, but they have no merit. The separation agreement was properly filed with the court. The property transfers were legally executed with your wife's signature. It will be difficult for them to prove coercion. The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. Frank arrived early, dressed in a conservative suit and carrying a briefcase containing all the relevant documentation. Patricia met him in the lobby, her professional demeanor reassuring. Sophia and her attorney are already here, she informed him, along with two witnesses, Mara Duval and, surprisingly, Andrew Monroe. When the judge called a brief recess to review the materials, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Sophia huddled with her attorney, occasionally shooting venomous glances toward Frank. But the most telling dynamic was between Sophia, Mara, and Andrew. The carefully maintained distance, the avoided eye contact. When court resumed, the judge delivered her ruling with crisp efficiency. Based on the evidence presented, I am denying the emergency motion for temporary spousal support and access to the marital home, she announced. The separation agreement appears to have been properly executed, and I see insufficient evidence of coercion or deception to invalidate it at this stage. She continued, addressing both parties directly. That said, this is a preliminary ruling only. Mrs. Kessler may pursue her claims regarding the validity of the separation agreement through the normal divorce proceedings. As they left the courtroom, Frank maintained his composure even as Sophia approached him, her face contorted with rage. "You set me up," she hissed, keeping her voice low enough that others wouldn't hear. "You knew about Andrew and Mara, didn't you? You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting myself," Frank corrected quietly, "just as I always have." "This isn't over," Sophia warned. "Not by a long shot." Frank noticed that neither Mara nor Andrew waited for Sophia. They had slipped away separately during the judge's ruling, rats abandoning a sinking ship. Later that evening, as Frank recounted the hearing to Cassidy over dinner, his phone rang repeatedly with calls from Sophia, which he declined. Text messages followed, ranging from threats to tearful pleas, all of which he read but did not answer. "She's unraveling," Cassidy observed as Frank's phone buzzed for the 12th time that evening. "The foundation she thought she was building has collapsed," Frank agreed. "Andrew, Mara, the financial support she expected, it's all falling apart." "Good," Cassidy said firmly. "She deserves it." Frank studied his daughter, concerned by the hardness in her voice. "Cassidy, I want you to remember something important. This situation, what's happening with your mother, it's the consequence of choices she made. But carrying anger toward her will only hurt you in the long run." Cassidy looked away. "I'm not angry. I'm just done." Frank reached across the table to take her hand. Being done with a relationship is different from being consumed by resentment. One frees you, the other traps you. Over the next week, reports of Sophia's erratic behavior multiplied. She was escorted from a restaurant after confronting a couple she believed was Mara and Andrew. She left increasingly incoherent voicemails for Cassidy, who continued to ignore her calls. She showed up at Frank's workplace twice more, resulting in a formal trespass warning from building security. Then, 3 weeks after the courtroom hearing, the final blow fell. Frank received a call from Patricia Donaldson with unexpected news. "Sophia's attorney has withdrawn from the case," she informed him. "And you won't believe the reason. She couldn't pay him." Frank guessed. "No," Patricia replied, "though that may also be true." Gerald Whitman filed a motion to withdraw, citing irreconcilable differences regarding case strategy and ethical concerns about client testimony. Frank absorbed this information. She wanted him to lie for her. "That would be my interpretation," Patricia confirmed. The next day brought the news Frank had half expected. Sophia, now without an attorney, filed a motion representing herself, alleging new and increasingly desperate claims. She accused Frank of hacking her phone, of threatening Andrew, of turning Cassidy against her through parental alienation. Patricia called these allegations the death throes of a failed case and advised Frank to simply wait it out. That evening, as Frank prepared dinner for himself and Cassidy, the doorbell rang. Given recent events, he approached cautiously, checking the security camera first. Sophia stood on the porch, her appearance a stark contrast to her usual polished image. Her hair was unstyled, her clothes rumpled, her makeup minimal and smudged. "Dad," Cassidy called from the kitchen. "Who is it?" Your mother, Frank replied quietly. Cassidy appeared in the hallway, her expression immediately hardening. Don't let her in. Frank hesitated. Cassidy, she'll try to manipulate you again, Cassidy insisted. That's all she does. The doorbell rang a second time, more insistent. I know you're in there. Sophia's voice came through the door. I can see your cars. Frank made a decision. I need to talk to her, Cassidy, just for a few minutes. Before his daughter could protest further, Frank opened the door, keeping his body positioned to block Sophia from entering. What do you want, Sophia? He asked, his voice neutral. She looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed from crying or drinking or both. I need money, Frank. Just enough to get a small apartment. I have nowhere to go. Where's Andrew? Frank asked, though he already knew the answer. Sophia let out a bitter laugh. With Mara, probably. Or some other woman. He dumped me when he realized I couldn't buy him things anymore. Frank felt no satisfaction at this confirmation. And Mara, your devoted friend, kicked me out, Sophia admitted, her voice breaking slightly. Said I was bringing too much drama into her life. After 20 years of friendship. Behind Frank, Cassidy had moved closer, listening. Please, Sophia continued, unaware of her daughter's presence. I'm sleeping in my car, Frank. Just enough for a security deposit on a studio apartment. I'll pay you back when I sell a house. You haven't sold a house in months, Frank pointed out. I have a potential client, Sophia countered quickly. A good lead. 3-bedroom in Myers Park. The lie was transparent, desperate. Frank could see Cassidy's expression hardening further. Sophia, Frank said carefully, I think you need help beyond money. Professional help. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me. Sophia snapped, her demeanor shifting instantly from pleading to hostile. You did this to me. You took everything. No, Mom, Cassidy said, stepping forward to stand beside her father. You threw everything away. Sophia's eyes widened to the sight of her daughter. Cassidy, baby, please, you don't understand what happened. Your father. Stop, Cassidy interrupted. Just stop lying. I saw the texts. I heard you planning to leave at my graduation. I watched you bring your boyfriend to my party. That was all you. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I love you, Cassidy. You're my daughter. You should have thought about that before you chose Andrew over us, Cassidy replied, her voice steady despite the emotion Frank could see in her eyes. It wasn't like that, Sophia insisted. Your father wasn't there for me emotionally. I was lonely. Andrew made me feel valued. Dad was there every day, Cassidy countered. Working, providing, helping me with homework, coming to my science fairs. Where were you? Shopping with Mara? At the gym with Andrew? The accuracy of the accusation seemed to physically impact Sophia. She staggered slightly, reaching for the doorframe to steady herself. Please, she whispered, the fight suddenly gone from her voice. I have nowhere else to go. Frank looked at his wife, the woman he had once loved, now reduced to begging on their doorstep. Despite everything, he felt a flicker of compassion. There's a motel on Woodlawn Road, he said, taking out his wallet. I'll pay for 2 weeks. That should give you time to figure out your next steps. He extracted several $100 bills and held them out. Sophia stared at the money, humiliation and gratitude warring on her face. This isn't what I wanted, she said softly, taking the cash. This isn't how our story was supposed to end. You wrote this ending yourself, Frank replied, not unkindly. One choice at a time. As Sophia turned to leave, Cassidy spoke again. Mom, she called, causing Sophia to look back hopefully. Don't contact me again. Not until you've gotten help and can take responsibility for what you did. The finality in Cassidy's voice seemed to hit Sophia harder than anything else that had happened. She nodded once, unable to speak, then walked slowly back to her car, a small Honda Civic she must have purchased with the last of her savings. Frank closed the door gently, turning to find Cassidy wiping away tears she had refused to let her mother see. You okay? He asked softly. Cassidy nodded. I had to say it. I couldn't keep getting those texts and calls from her, pretending nothing happened or that it was all your fault. Frank embraced his daughter, feeling her strength and vulnerability both. I'm proud of you, Cass. That took courage. Is it wrong that I still love her? Cassidy asked, her voice muffled against his shoulder. Even after everything. No, Frank assured her. It's not wrong. It's human. And it's okay to hold both things at once, love for who she was and anger for what she did. The official divorce decree arrived on a Tuesday morning in early August, a surprisingly understated document to mark the end of 20 years of marriage. Frank signed his portion, then placed it in the outgoing mail pile on his desk, feeling neither triumph nor regret. It was simply done. Sophia had eventually found an attorney willing to take her case, but the effort had been largely symbolic. With the evidence against her so overwhelming and her own credibility so damaged, the final settlement had been nearly identical to the original separation agreement. She received a modest cash payment and her personal property, but nothing more. Frank closed the folder containing his copy of the decree and turned his attention to more pressing matters, specifically helping Cassidy prepare for her upcoming move to NC State for her freshman year of college. "Dad," Cassidy called from the hallway. "Do you know where the extra storage bins are? I need one more for my books." "Garage, top shelf near the workbench," Frank replied. Rising from his desk, he found Cassidy in her room, surrounded by the organized chaos of packing. Clothing was sorted into neat piles. Electronic equipment was carefully wrapped in bubble packaging. Books were stacked by subject, ready to be boxed. "Excited?" Frank asked, leaning against the doorframe. Cassidy looked up, a mix of anticipation and anxiety on her face. "Excited. Nervous. Sad about leaving you. All of it at once." Frank nodded, understanding completely. "That sounds about right for this moment. I keep thinking about what would have happened if Mom hadn't." Cassidy trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. "If she'd been here to help you pack." Frank supplied gently. "Yeah," Cassidy acknowledged. "It's weird. I'm still so angry at her, but sometimes I just miss how things were before." Frank entered the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "I've been thinking about that too," he admitted. "Your mother made terrible choices. But before Andrew, before all of it, we had some good years. I don't want you to forget that." Cassidy set down the book she'd been holding. "Have you heard from her lately?" "Not directly," Frank replied. "Jonas mentioned seeing her at a coffee shop downtown last week. Said she looked better, more put together." After the divorce was finalized, Sophia had finally secured a small apartment and, according to mutual acquaintances, had begun attending therapy. She'd also, reportedly, cut ties completely with both Andrew and Mara. "Do you think she's really changed?" Cassidy asked skeptically. "I don't know," Frank answered honestly. "Change is hard. Real change takes time and work." They worked in companionable silence for a while, packing books into the storage bin Frank had retrieved from the garage. It wasn't until they reached the family photo albums that Cassidy spoke again. "Should I take these?" she asked, holding up a photo of the three of them at the beach years ago. Cassidy, around 10 years old, flanked by smiling parents. Frank studied the image. "That's up to you, kiddo. They're your memories, too." Cassidy traced her finger over her mother's face in the photograph. "I don't hate her, Dad. I just can't trust her." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Frank assured her. "Trust has to be earned, especially after it's been broken." The conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Frank checked his watch. It was too early for Jonas, who was coming to help load Cassidy's belongings into his truck for the move to Raleigh. When he opened the front door, he found not Jonas, but Sophia standing on the porch, reminiscent of her desperate visit months ago, but with a crucial difference. This time, she was well-groomed, clear-eyed, and composed. "Hello, Frank," she said quietly. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Frank regarded his ex-wife carefully. "Cassidy and I are packing. She moves into her dorm next week." Sophia nodded, unsurprised. "I remember. NC State orientation starts Monday." Of course she would know. Despite everything, she was still Cassidy's mother. "What do you want, Sophia?" Frank asked, not unkindly, but with warranted caution. "I want to give Cassidy something," Sophia replied, holding up a small gift bag. "For her dorm room, if she'll accept it." Frank hesitated, glancing back toward the stairs. "That's her decision to make." "I understand," Sophia said, handing him the bag. "I don't expect forgiveness, Frank. I don't want her to go to college thinking her mother doesn't care. There is a sincerity in Sophia's voice that Frank hadn't heard in years, not the manipulative emotionality she'd employed during their divorce proceedings, but something more genuine. "I'll give it to her," he promised, "and I'll tell her you stopped by." Sophia nodded, turning to leave, then paused. "I'm seeing someone," she said. "A therapist, I mean. Twice a week." "That's good," Frank replied, meaning it. "I'm learning a lot about myself." None of it particularly flattering. Sophia continued with a self-deprecating smile. "But necessary, I think." Frank simply nodded, unwilling to offer either absolution or skepticism. "I want to ask how you are," Sophia added. "Jonas tells me you're doing well." "I'm glad for that, Frank. I mean it." With that, she walked back to her car, the same Honda Civic, though now clean and well-maintained, and drove away. Frank closed the door and stood for a moment in the foyer, the gift bag in his hand, feeling strangely weighted with importance. Finally, he climbed the stairs back to Cassidy's room. "Who was it?" she asked, looking up from her packing. "Your mother," Frank answered honestly. "She brought you something for your dorm room." He held out the gift bag. Cassidy stared at it for a long moment, conflicting emotions crossing her face. "You don't have to accept it," Frank assured her. "It's entirely your choice." Slowly, Cassidy reached for the bag. "Did she say anything?" "That she's seeing a therapist," Frank replied, "and that she wants you to know she cares." Cassidy opened the gift bag, removing tissue paper to reveal a small, framed photograph, the same beach photo they had just been discussing, along with a handwritten note. Cassidy read it silently, her expression unreadable. "What does it say?" Frank asked after a moment. Cassidy handed him the note. "Cassidy, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness or even your attention. What I did was unforgivable on every level. I betrayed our family and hurt you deeply on what should have been one of the happiest days of your life. I'm working on myself now, trying to understand why I made such destructive choices and how to become someone worthy of being in your life again someday. I don't expect that day to come soon, or even at all. That's your decision, and I will respect it either way. This photo reminds me of a time when I was the mother you deserved. I hope that someday I can be that person again. I love you always." Mom. Frank handed the note back, careful to keep his expression neutral. "Thoughts?" Cassidy studied the photo again. "It's a start, I guess. Better than the texts blaming you for everything." "It is," Frank agreed. "I'm not ready to see her," Cassidy said firmly. "But maybe I'll keep this as a reminder of better times." The final piece of Sophia's downfall came unexpectedly, 2 months after Cassidy had settled into college life. Frank was reviewing some design schematics for work when his phone rang with Jonas's number. "You're not going to believe this," his friend said without preamble. "Andrew Monroe was arrested last night." Frank set down his pencil. "For what?" "Fraud, primarily," Jonas replied. "Apparently, our gym rat friend has been running a little side business targeting wealthy women, gaining access to their financial information, and cleaning them out." Frank felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Sophia, among others," Jonas confirmed, "including Mara, and at least 3 other women across Charlotte." "How much did he take?" Frank asked. "From Sophia?" "About 60,000, according to the detective who contacted me. They found my name in Andrew's notes as a connection to both Sophia and Mara." Frank closed his eyes, processing this information. 60,000 explained the depletion of Sophia's personal savings money she'd inherited from her parents years ago and had kept in a separate account. Money that, ironically, Frank had never touched during their divorce proceedings because he considered it her sole property. "Does Sophia know?" Frank asked. "That's the thing," Jonas replied. "She's the one who turned him in. Apparently, she'd been gathering evidence for months. Even wore a wire to get him on tape admitting to the scheme." This revelation stunned Frank. The Sophia he knew would have been too proud, too concerned with appearances to ever admit being conned so thoroughly. "The detective said she was instrumental in building the case," Jonas continued. "Said without her, they might never have connected the dots between the victims." After hanging up, Frank sat at his desk, turning this new information over in his mind. Perhaps Sophia's claims about therapy and change weren't entirely performative after all. His phone buzzed again, a text from Cassidy. Have you heard about Andrew? Mom just called to tell me. First time we've spoken in months. In late October, Frank received an unexpected email from his attorney, Patricia Donaldson. Attached was a copy of a legal filing, a victim impact statement from Sophia for Andrew's upcoming sentencing hearing. Frank opened the document with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. Sophia's statement was concise, clear, and surprisingly powerful. Your Honor, I am one of Andrew Monroe's victims. Though the financial damage he caused me pales in comparison to the emotional and familial destruction that resulted from my involvement with him. To be clear, Mr. Monroe did not force me to make bad decisions. He did not compel me to betray my husband, alienate my daughter, or throw away a 20-year marriage. I made those choices myself, influenced by his manipulation, but ultimately responsible for my own actions. What Mr. Monroe did was target me at a vulnerable time in my life. He recognized my dissatisfaction and vanity and exploited them expertly. He encouraged me to blame others for my unhappiness rather than look inward. And yes, he systematically defrauded me of $62,500 under the guise of investing in his business ventures. The money is gone, and I accept that loss as partly the consequence of my own poor judgment. But the greater loss, that of my family's trust and respect, is one I continue to work daily to address. With no guarantee of recovery, that I ask the court to consider not just the financial damage Mr. Monroe has caused his victims, but the collateral damage to families, relationships, and communities. These are losses that cannot be quantified in dollars, but are no less real. Respectfully submitted, Sophia Kessler. After careful consideration, Frank composed a brief email to Sophia. I read your victim impact statement. It took courage to write. I hope you're doing okay. Sophia's reply came hours later. Thank you, Frank. That means more than you know. I am doing better one day at a time, as they say in all the therapy groups. The money is gone, but I'm back to selling houses regularly now. Small ones, nothing fancy, but it's honest work that I've seen Cassidy twice this semester. Brief coffee meetings at her campus. We're talking at least. Baby steps. That I hope you're well. I hear good things from Jonas occasionally. I'm glad. Frank closed his laptop, feeling an unexpected sense of closure. The revenge he had orchestrated months ago suddenly seemed less important than the fact that both he and Sophia were finding ways to move forward with their lives. November brought an unexpected development. Frank received a call from Patricia Donaldson. Frank, I've just received some interesting information you should be aware of, she began. It concerns Mara Duval. What about her? Frank asked. She's filed a civil lawsuit against Sophia, Patricia explained, claiming Sophia knew about Andrew's criminal activities and failed to warn her, allowing her to become his next victim. Frank paused in his packing. That's absurd. Sophia was a victim herself. Exactly, Patricia agreed. But Mara is claiming Sophia discovered Andrew's scheme earlier than she admitted and deliberately kept quiet to punish Mara for their falling out. Is there any merit to this? None that I can see, Patricia replied. But the interesting part is what's happening in discovery. Mara has been forced to turn over text messages between herself and Andrew dating back to when Sophia was still married to you. Frank immediately grasped the significance, showing that Mara and Andrew were involved while Sophia was with him. More than that, Patricia continued, the messages strongly suggest Mara introduced Andrew to Sophia specifically to create drama in your marriage. There are texts where she calls it Operation Freedom, apparently helping Sophia escape what Mara characterized as a controlling relationship with you. The revelation landed like a physical blow. She orchestrated the whole thing. Not entirely, Patricia qualified. Sophia was certainly a willing participant. But Mara appears to have deliberately connected them, encouraged the affair, and advised Sophia on how to maximize the drama of her exit. Frank sat heavily on the edge of the bed, processing this information. Does Sophia know about these texts? She does now, Patricia confirmed. Her attorney in the civil case has received copies. After hanging up, Frank stared at the half-packed suitcase, his mind racing. If Mara had deliberately engineered the introduction between Sophia and Andrew, knowing Andrew's predatory nature. His phone rang again, this time with Cassidy's number. "Dad, have you heard?" she asked immediately. "About Mara's lawsuit?" "Yes, just now." "No, about Mom's countersuit," Cassidy corrected. "She's filed a civil claim against Mara for intentional infliction of emotional distress and conspiracy. She says Mara deliberately set her up with Andrew, knowing he was a con artist." "Could she prove that?" Frank asked. "Apparently, yes," Cassidy replied. "Mom says Mara had introduced Andrew to 2 other women before her, both of whom lost money to him. She's found one of them willing to testify." The civil case against Mara moved quickly, bolstered by evidence from Andrew's criminal prosecution. 3 weeks after Frank provided his statement, Cassidy called with an update. "Mom won," she announced. Or rather, Mara gave up. "They reached a settlement yesterday." "What were the terms?" Frank asked. "Mara has to sell her condo and pay Mom and the other victims a percentage of the proceeds," Cassidy explained. "And she had to provide a written confession about her involvement with Andrew that could be used in his sentencing." "How's your mother taking it?" Frank asked, finding that he genuinely wanted to know. "Mixed," Cassidy replied. "Relieved it's over. Still processing the betrayal. But stronger, I think. More. I don't know, grounded. She's different, Dad. In a good way." "I'm glad to hear that," Frank said, meaning it. "For both your sakes." "She mentioned you helped with the case," Cassidy continued. "That was really decent of you." "It was the right thing to do," Frank said simply. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place a week later, when Frank received a certified letter from his attorney. Inside was a check for a substantial amount, along with a brief note from Patricia. "Frank, this came from Sophia's attorney today. She has established a scholarship fund in your father's name at NC State's engineering department with half of her settlement from Mara Duval. The enclosed check represents the other half, which she felt belonged to you as the other injured party in Mara's scheme. She requests no acknowledgement or thanks. I'm simply fulfilling my obligation as your attorney to deliver it." Patricia Frank stared at the check in disbelief. The scholarship fund in his father's name, a gesture that showed genuine remorse and understanding. His father had been an engineer who had inspired both Frank and, later, Cassidy to pursue the field. The check itself was significant, not life-changing, but substantial enough to represent true sacrifice on Sophia's part. After a moment's consideration, Frank placed it in a folder marked Cassidy's future. That evening, Frank composed a brief email to Sophia. "The scholarship in my father's name is deeply appreciated. He would have been honored. The funds you sent will go toward Cassidy's future education. Thank you for both gestures." Frank Sophia's reply was equally concise. It felt right. "Nothing can undo the past, but perhaps we can both help shape a better future." 6 months later, as spring bloomed across North Carolina, Frank found himself behind the wheel of a recently purchased classic Ford Bronco, the windows down, warm air rushing through the cab. Beside him, Cassidy laughed as he navigated the coastal highway. "I still can't believe you bought this thing," she said, running her hand appreciatively over the restored dashboard. "Mom always said you'd never drive anything but that boring pickup. Your mother didn't know everything about me," Frank replied with a slight smile. "Besides, I've wanted one of these since I was your age." They were headed to the Outer Banks for a long weekend, Cassidy's spring break from her second semester at college. The past 6 months had brought a gradual settling of the chaos that had defined the previous year. Frank had found a comfortable routine in his solitary life, focused on his work, his friendships, and most importantly, his relationship with his daughter. "Look at that," Cassidy said suddenly, pointing to a roadside motel. They were approaching a faded 2-story structure with peeling paint and a flickering neon vacancy sign. "The Ocean View Motel. Isn't that where your mother stayed right after the divorce?" Frank confirmed, slowing slightly as they passed. "Yes, I think it is." Outside the motel office, they glimpsed a familiar figure, Mara Duval, looking considerably less polished than in her previous life. Her designer clothes had been replaced by a motel uniform, and she appeared to be arguing with an older man who was presumably the manager. Cassidy burst into unexpected laughter. "Is that Mara? Working in motel?" "Looks that way," Frank replied, unable to suppress his own chuckle. "Last I heard, She lost pretty much everything between Andrew's scam and the legal settlements. Poetic justice, Cassidy observed. The woman who tried to ruin everyone's lives has to clean bathrooms for a living. As they drove past, Frank felt a strange sense of completion, as if the final piece of a complex puzzle had fallen into place. Not through his own machinations this time, but through the natural course of consequences flowing from actions. You know, he said thoughtfully, when I was planning everything last year, the separation papers, securing the assets, preparing for your mother's announcement, I thought revenge was what I needed. And it wasn't, Cassidy asked, turning to study her father's profile. No, Frank said simply. What I needed was to protect you and myself, to ensure we could move forward with security and dignity. The revenge aspect, it gave me focus at the time, but it wasn't what ultimately mattered. They drove in comfortable silence for several miles, the coastline appearing intermittently through breaks in the trees. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the highway, painting everything in warm gold light. Dad, Cassidy said finally, are you happy now? Frank considered the question carefully. Was he happy? His life had been upended, his 20-year marriage destroyed, his trust in relationships fundamentally altered. And yet, he thought about his work, which continued to challenge and engage him. About his home, peaceful now without the underlying tension of the past years. About Jonas and other friends whose loyalty had never wavered. About Cassidy, flourishing despite everything she'd witnessed. And yes, even about Sophia, who had faced her demons and emerged changed, not redemption exactly, but growth that deserved acknowledgement. You know what? Frank said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. I am. Finally, Cassidy reached over and squeezed his hand briefly. Me too, Dad. Finally, as they continued down the coastal highway, heading toward the vacation that marked their new beginning, Frank reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Some endings weren't tragedies, he realized. They were just the truth finally coming home. The Bronco's engine hummed steadily as they drove toward the horizon. Father and daughter, survivors and victors in their own quiet way, not through vengeance, but through resilience, integrity, and the courage to build something new from the ashes of what had been lost.